Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, that's Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we've got a brand spanking new era of a show lined up for you. Geoff Soffer, manager to the stars, including a few of your favorite guests of this very podcast, and most importantly, my number one baby mama. Geoff is awesome, and he's representing the first of our much anticipated sprinkling of industry professionals. Some of them also happen to be actors and have that little hat in their caps, but we're going to talk about casting directors, we're going to talk to agents, all of those kind of folks as well. I really hope you'll enjoy these episodes. I have striven to make this podcast as an exploration of different paths as opposed to the sort of how-to kind of podcast. It's just kind of a different show, and that's not what I want to make this, but I do feel like this is an essential avenue of the industry to at least explore for our post-college listeners or those about to graduate. For our listeners who are still in high school or maybe early college, this might be a bit advanced and a bit far afield for you. So please feel free, bookmark this, come back to it in a few years if you want. This content will still be fresh and piping hot when you get back to it. But today on the show, Geoff and I do talk a lot about what it is to be a manager, as well as some of the other hats he was wearing in terms of he's a casting director and a producer, etc. And most relevantly to our young actors, we talked a lot about what a manager-actor relationship is, and we get into what Geoff looks for in a client. You'll also notice I'm trying to shrink two parts of the episode here. These are just like notes I've taken for myself as I listen back to the episodes. I'm trying to shorten the bios of the guests, as well as the table of contents, which you've just heard at the beginning of each episode. I just want you to, when you hear that, don't think that this episode is less exciting or the bios of the people are less impressive just because they're shorter. I also do realize in saying this all to you now, any time I've saved in shrinking that part of the episode has been wasted, but I thought this was an interesting peek behind the curtain, so I thought you'd appreciate that. And in future episodes, we're just going to keep it rolling, I say. As far as how things are going on my end, November is off to a rollicking good start for Charlie. This fall has really been about an investigation of wellness for me, of my mind, of my body, and my spirit. I've really tried to take inventory of my diet and exercise parts of my life. I'm fully in two different kinds of therapy at the moment. And I'm telling you, therapy is like going to the dentist twice a week for your brain. Like my brain is just like sparkling clean right now. And I promise I'm not just saying that because MTCA is doing a health and wellness webinar on November 17th, though you should absolutely attend that. Erica, our wellness coach, is fantastic. But I do sincerely hope all of you are taking care of yourself and your health in all the ways that you can out there. What I will shill for, unlike our wellness webinar, which I guess I've kind of shilled for, but I'm not really shilling for that. I was just talking to you. But I will shill for our upcoming junior workshop, which is tonight. If you are listening to this episode on airdrop day, it is tonight at 8 p.m. If you download this episode a few days late, you've snoozed and you've lost. This is for any juniors or any younger students, sophomore, freshman, even in middle school, or the parents of such a student. And if you know anyone you think would benefit from this, it's a great time. If you're listening to the episode, you still got time, send them on our website. They'll find all the info. And did I mention it's free? Just like this podcast, free, so much great free content, more of which let's get to pronto with the great Geoffrey Soffer. We are honored to be joined by Geoffrey Soffer, who is a man of many hyphens. I'm going to read your bio before we jump into this, Geoff. I'm going to do it. I'm going to fully introduce you to these wonderful people. He's a man of many hyphens. He's been a manager currently and a producer. He's a teacher. He's a former casting director, a former child actor. We'll get into all of these subjects. He's had a varied education. He spent some time at NYU Cap 21 in the pre-college program. He spent a couple years at CCM, a season at Boston Conservatory, and we'll get into all of those. He was a child actor in the first national tour of Les Mis, where he played Gavroche. He was a casting director for ABC. He did stuff like Ugly Betty. He cast Ugly Betty. He's a producer on things like He's Way More Famous Than You and the executive producer of The Last 5 Years. That was the Jeremy Jordan one, 2014.
Yes.
What a
Yep.
life.
I should say one of them. One of the
executive producers. Thank you. Yes, that's very good.
Well,
I say I'm the director of MTCA, but I'm one of the directors of MTCA, and I have to be careful about that. I agree.
It's a team.
Let me finish your bio, Geoff.
Okay, go.
Geoff has also been a teacher at Brown, a Pace, Carnegie Mellon. He's managed for many years. He's a manager, and including some of the most attractive guests on this very podcast, he has been a manager. Now I'm officially welcoming you on the pod, Geoff. How are you doing?
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm so good. I kind of fished for this because I was like, oh, you're doing this amazing podcast. Congratulations. Like, totally happy to be on it. But I never do these things because it's like the repressed child actor in me. It's like I've sort of like gotten rid of it. But I'm honored to be asked and to be one of the first industry people to be
first,
on your...
not even one of the first. You're the first. We are breaking the seal and unleashing a whole new world of possibilities. But this is something, Meghan and I have been talking about this for months. We're really excited for, like, we kind of teased this at the end of last season. Our next phase is going to be bringing on some casting people, some managers, some agents, different things of going, let's hear about what some of the business. We know so many of our, especially college age and right out of college actors are really concerned with this aspect of the business. So we're going to get into it. But before we get to this section, the side of you as a professional adult manager, can you talk to me a little bit about your background as a child performer? So how did that start? How did it happen? Were you acting since you were a toddler, or was it a lark of you were discovered at some open call? How did all that happen?
I was always just sort of finding my corner of the sky. Hey now. I wasn't an athlete. But I was outgoing and I loved to laugh and I loved people. And my parents were very, we would always sing a lot in the car. And my parents were they were fond of musical theater. So I just was a musical kid. And then my grandmother saw an ad in the Philadelphia Inquirer that said the new hit Broadway musical Les Miserables that just opened is now casting the national tour, which is in rehearsal in wherever it was, DC. And they were looking for Gavroche. They were coming to Philadelphia. Johnson Liff was coming to Philadelphia with Richard J. Alexander and the director. And, the director in New York at the time. My grandmother was like, Geoffrey should go do that. Like, he's not an athlete. He has a nice voice.
This is his only chance.
He doesn't mind being, like, this is your chance. And I was like, sure, cool. I didn't know what Broadway was. I had never seen a Broadway show. And I went and I auditioned. The London cast recording had just come out. And I went in and I sang Consider Yourself, but I had a British accent.
Of course.
And I sang the full version of Little People in a British accent. And they were like, can you not do the British accent? We're like Americans here.
But not easy. As a kid, could you make the change? That's hard. You're like, no, I learned it with this accent.
Yeah. I was like, I'm British. Yeah. I'm British. And I guess it worked.
I'm so sorry, Governor. I can't do it. I wish I could.
It was crazy. No. But they liked it. And I had no expectation on outcome. I was just there for the experience and the fun of it. It was a free day out of school with my mom, and got a call an hour later from Tara Rubin talking to my mom, and I'm listening on the other line. My mom picks up. She's like, can you come back with Geoffrey? The director wants to work with him a bit. So I came back. We tried to lose the British accent again, unsuccessfully. But Richard J. at the end of it was like, so do you want to go to DC in September and start rehearsing the national tour of Les Mis?
So cool.
And I was like, sure, cool. I had no idea what that was. But that was my foray. I joined Equity. I went down and worked with all these like incredible Broadway people. But it was like Victoria Clark and Hugh Pinero and Barbara Walsh and Scott Elliott and all these incredible Broadway people that I spent 6 months of my childhood with, of that period.
What about, so then let's jump forward a couple of years. So now as you're looking at colleges, and it seemed like you couldn't stop attending colleges for short bits of time, and maybe we'll get into some of that. What was your goal in terms of what you were looking? Were you thinking, I'm going to go to school and be a professional actor? Did any part of you think, all the hyphens that you now have, did you think I might be interested in producing or managing or casting, or was it that discovered later?
I was very focused on acting. I wanted to be an actor. I believed I was a good actor. I was getting a lot of attention. I was always working. I say with great humility. Like, it wasn't because like the jobs weren't starting to come. I think it was like my imagination was just too big, and I was just impatient with how slow my career was moving.
Mm-hmm.
Then the curiosity killed the cat, and I, continued to pursue my performing arts career.
Uh-huh.
But also I was like growing impatient because I was also becoming increasingly aware of the business
Uh-huh.
and increasingly aware of competition
Yeah.
and actors that I was auditioning with and people that I was always seeing in New York that were starting to get jobs, and that I wanted, and I was getting
Mm-hmm.
jobs that like, it wasn't what I truly wanted to do.
Well, and especially if you fell in love with the business for the community aspect, then being introduced to that competitive aspect is it's very different, right? The part of like, hey, we're all on a team in this show and we love you and we're supporting you. And then you're like the business side of things, which is more like only one of us is booking this job, is very different. It feels like, how's that all the same world that we, could all be in the cast and be lovey-dovey, and then also like, I'm never going to work again, I'm gouging your eyes out, sort of feels like that exists in the same world is really tricky.
Well, CCM back then was very competitive,
Mm-hmm.
because there were a lot fewer musical theater schools. Michigan, there was no Gavin Creel and Celia Keenan Bolger and Andrew Keenan Bolger yet to sort of make Michigan, Benj Pasek, like that sort of came into fruition with actually our generation. CCM was like the first musical theater program that like was putting itself out there as like, hey, we crank out Broadway performers. I was very hungry. And so I went to CCM. I learned as much as I could. I made some of the best friends I've ever had. It was an incredible experience. They politely asked me to leave.
Mm-hmm. You're polite about it.
I
This is when the cut system would have existed, right? So
Yes.
this
Oh
was
yeah.
what was in numbers wise. What was it in terms of a lot of these schools? This still lives. I mean, this is not the cut system has not existed for years now. Still, I'll hear parents talk about. Is there a cut there? How's it work? I mean, it really it infused into the memory of a lot of these schools. But maybe if like how many started and then what are they trying to cut to in the CCM world?
I think there were probably 25 students in my freshman class.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the first semester, there were a few people that had naturally dropped out because it was just
It's hard.
brutal back
Yeah.
then. It was
Yeah.
very cutthroat. They were really gearing you up for the industry how it was back
Uh-huh.
then. This is when people start emerging. The sophomore year, the junior year, you really see who has what it takes to have a career and the longevity. And I
Mm-hmm.
really didn't. And I didn't see that at the time. I see that now as a teacher and a manager, and knowing what it takes and what I demand of my clients. But I just was like very focused on the business and knowing that everybody said I had talent and I had a nice voice and I was getting cast and I was booking jobs. I thought that's all that it took.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Boston Conservatory because it was like last minute. It was a panic attack. My parents were like, Geoffrey, you have to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
It's a generation like this is 1997. Everybody goes to college, especially in
Mm-hmm.
our family. And so I was like, I'll go to BOCO. And I was there I was also like coming into my identity, and like,
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of a mess, in like kind of a responsible way, like exploring everything that the world has to offer that I think a lot of kids experience at that point in their life. And going to Shakespeare at 8 a.m. was not
Mm-hmm.
one of them. And and
You're like, I'm learning my identity, and it's not Shakespeare. That's not part of my
I mean,
identity.
it's
It's not
like
part of the
hooking up with
awakening.
boys. I mean, it's very much like, it's
I
like
mean,
not.
there's some of that in Shakespeare. Let's be clear. There is some of that exists. But yes, I'm with you.
I mean, and all of it was perfect. Like, I wouldn't go back and say like all of those low points. Like, that was a very low point in
Mm-hmm.
my life. I was searching for myself. My parents were very nearby, but very like nearby, like in spirit. But like they were like, you have to figure out yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'm dropping out and I'm moving to New York and I'm going to be a Broadway
Mm-hmm.
star. And I continued to act. I went
Mm-hmm.
away. I did regional theater. I did the Muni. I did Radio City Christmas show. And then, after a year of that, I was like, I want stability. I want
Mm-hmm.
to be a part of a long-term team. And
So
yeah.
yeah, so let's get into that, because I mean, this is one of those things, especially some of my high school students will often ask, or parents of like, I really want to be in the business, but like, and I'll often explain, I'm like, I think most people don't go to school for casting or go to school to be a manager, or to be an agent. That you're producing. It's like most often those are people who went to school for acting or for directing or for something, and then they made that transition. How did that transition happen to you? Was it a one-time decision where you said, you know what, I'm going to start getting into casting now, I'm done with acting, or was it a fade of, I'm going to do this internship and we'll see where it goes? And, I guess, especially as that was starting to happen, because I feel like this is true for a lot of people as they make shifts in the business. It's not often a snap your fingers and it's done. I guess I'm interested in what was that conversation with your performer self, as you were saying, I might want to step behind the table, but was some part of you going, no, 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 I don't want to?
Yes. Oh gosh. Devastating. It
Yeah.
was really hard. It was another identity crisis. Like, who am I? I've always been a child performer since the age I was this. And then I was a paid child performer. And,
Mm-hmm.
I had accrued quite a savings that my parents had set aside for me quite responsibly. But I was very insistent on chasing my inspiration and doing what brings me joy and working with people that I feel inspired to work with. So I
Mm-hmm.
got a job interning at the Roundabout Theater Company. And it was when Cabaret originally opened with Natasha Richardson and Alan Cumming.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim Carnahan was an emerging casting director in New York. And his business was starting to flourish. And
Mm-hmm.
I was brought in as an intern because I sort of had an encyclopedic memory of actors and replacements and musicals specifically. So Jim hired me, and I was quickly promoted to be his assistant and then his associate. And so by the time I was like 21, I was I was like working with Sondheim and Sam
Uh-huh.
Mendes and like all of these legends and all of these incredible people. And I did that for 2 years. And I started to get known as like a casting associate and
Mm-hmm.
somebody that was like being mentored by Jim Carnahan, who was this like award-winning Broadway casting director. And I freaked out by that. I got freaked out by that. I was like, no, 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 no. I'm not a casting director. I'm an actor. I'm going back to acting.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to acting for like a minute, and I got an agent. I got an agent again. I got a good agent again. I found people who believed in me. There were a lot of people who were like, you're a joke. Like, you're an actor? Wait, you're an actor? No, you're a casting director.
Mm-hmm.
You're not an actor, you're a casting director. So I had an identity crisis. I also was like trying to pay my rent. And I was also trying to impress my parents and
Mm-hmm.
say that I could be self-sufficient on my own. I was also like dealing with, coming out of the closet and ending a first boyfriend relationship. So um, I went back to I went back to acting with like my tail under my legs, and a casting director was like, I will let you freelance with me while you audition. Like, you can be a casting director and an actor. This is
Mm-hmm.
before there were people who did both. Like,
Right.
Marcia DeBonis is a name that I encourage everybody to look up. She's one of the great character actors who live in New York, and I love her.
She's on
She
our
has
list of invites, of podcast
Oh
invites,
gosh,
Geoff.
great, great,
We play
great.
softball together. We've done a show together. Marsha's on the list. Don't worry, she's on the list.
Great hybrid person when it
Yep.
comes to like, somebody who's like, I'm not what they're hiring every day enough when I'm 25 that I can make a living out
Uh-huh.
of it. So she started working in casting, but she continued to like put out there that like, no, I'm an actor first and foremost.
Yep.
Anyway, I found Cindy Rush was a casting director who let me do that. She let me audition for a project she was casting called I Sing. I
Mm-hmm.
booked it. She was like, shoot. So I worked for her during the day.
Mm-hmm.
I covered that show at night. Luckily, it only ran for a few months. And then after I Sing, I was like, you know what? I did it. I
Mm-hmm.
got my New York
You had it
credit.
right. Yeah.
Um, I want to go pursue the casting thing, and then I was off and running, and I was like, I have to find my path. I have to
Mm-hmm.
find stability, and I have to find my adult identity. And that
Mm-hmm.
probably wasn't until I was like 24, 25.
Mm-hmm. It's so cool, and I do think I love that the difference. I think for a lot of our students, they've heard nothing but multi-hyphenate, have all these great ideas. I can be this and this and this and this. And I think it was really your generation. I'm going to say our generation. We're in the same generation that kind of forged that a little bit. Because I mean, certainly a lot of our coaches have had the experience when they say I'm an MTCA coach and they go, oh, so you're not an actor anymore? It's like, no, I do both. I can do both. I can be a teacher and a director and an actor. And, but we've certainly had that experience still. Whereas I do think students today know they're going to grow up into a world where it's like, oh, cool. And you write and you direct. That's perfect. We want that. That's actually more attractive for you as an actor versus it used to be like, I'm an actor and only an actor. And that was encouraged, or you're not an actor at all. It sort of was the rule,
There were lanes. It's the best way to describe it. There used to be a lot of lanes, and there used to be a lot of rules.
Yep.
And I enjoy rules. I like knowing where the rules are. But I also feel like sometimes you have to push it forward, and you have to as you get older, it becomes harder to push through those rules and sort of push the boundaries, which is why I always love working with young people, because they always shock me a little bit by asking certain things. Like one of my young, brilliant Broadway clients said to me the other day, he's like, okay, you look into this. And I was like, oh my God, I never would have said that at 21.
Go do that work for me.
Yeah, but I love that they think like that, because they're not thinking about, oh, the rules are that you don't say that to your manager. You hold your manager, and no, let's cut through all of that stuff and really what do you do, and what are you inspired to do, and what are you inspired to work on?
Geoff, you're getting a little bit ahead of us. We have a great conversation about type and branding and some of that stuff coming later. I promise that's in the second half of the show. But I want to make sure we talk a little bit about managing, just because we've hinted at this. So I guess when that started for you, I know you've been doing it for a while now. Is that concurrently with casting that you already were starting to be a manager, or was that kind of after you moved into, all right, that chapter's over, now I'm going to become a manager?
I was a casting director at ABC, and I worked on television shows. And I was part of a team in New York that looked after, the New York talent pool. Casting directors Rosalie Joseph and Marcy Phillips, they do legendary work, and their beloved casting directors. Janet Murphy's another one. And I got a job at 25 as a coordinator in that office. And it was an incredible period of time. I was able to really come into myself and fall in love with actors, and not just from the side of being one. That was an affirmation to me, and the job that I needed, and the period of time that I needed to say oh, you know what? You're not that. And so I did that at ABC until I was 30. And I loved it, and I got promoted, and I loved those people, and it was an incredible period of time. I worked on the ABC Diversity Showcase, which is now one of the most popular programs in the entertainment industry for championing new talent. And in 2010 or something, I happened to work on the pilot Ugly Betty, and the show got picked up and moved to LA. And
for our listeners who don't know what Ugly Betty is, it's a show called Ugly Betty, where the lead actor, who is Ugly Betty, is an incredibly attractive person. I just want you to know, if you don't know what the 2000s were like, this is what we had shows called Ugly Betty, where models played the ugly character on the show. Anyway, continue, Geoff.
It was a cultural revolution in television. It cracked open. It introduced audiences to America Ferrera. And it was an incredible piece of television at the time. It talked a lot about sexuality, a lot about identity, about being yourself, celebrating who you really are and what your gifts are. And that show came into my life. I became friends with the creator, Sylvia Orta, and it went to LA. I stayed in New York. I didn't want to go to LA. But two seasons passed, and the show, because of the tax credits that were starting to take off in New York, the show, I'm getting too in the weeds, but the show came back to
our listeners are mostly here for the tax credit conversation. They don't really want to hear about anything but the
This is why I'm not an actor, because I could literally have a conversation about New York tax credits for 30 minutes, not because I know a lot, just because I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, of course.
But anyway, the show came back to New York. And it sort of kickstarted the big revolution of making New York a big hub for television and film again. the creator of the show was like, do you want to cast the show? He said, do you want to come back and work on the show? And it would require leaving ABC, leaving your corporate job, and like,
Mm-hmm.
overlooking a lot of pilots and working on a broad spectrum of shows and really committing to this show.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. I worked on Ugly Betty for 2 seasons, 2 years, changed my life. Every script I felt it was just creatively very fulfilling to hire actors for that job. And Silvio and the creators gave me an opportunity to just like really cast it, really put in my vision. In the last 2 seasons, the show was canceled after season 4, but
Not
and I
because
knew
of
that
you, though, you don't think?
it was because of the casting. I think,
It was because of the casting. Yeah. But there's so many
who's Bernadette
great.
Peters?
Exactly. I would say there's so many great New York theater actors in that show too. Like,
Watch it.
You look at it, you're like, oh my god, and you, and some of them who weren't even that successful at the time, who now have become super successful.
Definitely. I was talking to Faith Prince the other day, who like she wasn't really doing a lot of television before Ugly Betty, and then that sort of like brought her back. And it's Patti LuPone, like it's an incredible cast, not just from my work, if I may say so myself, but Junie Lowry Johnson, Libby Goldstein, and Jeff Greenberg. But anyway, after that experience, I was lucky enough to become friendly with Judith Light, the incredible actor. And she's like, you're a manager. She's like, you're really a manager. Casting is fun, but like you really need to get into the weeds with actors and really start speaking the language. And she pushed me into managing actors. After Ugly Betty, I continued to cast a couple shows, but it didn't have the same spark that project had, and that changed my life. And I was like, oh, I think I'm a manager.
Okay, so you think you're a manager to the best of your ability. Now, what is a manager? Like, so what if I'm a young person, I'm like, I've heard some people have agents, they have managers, sometimes they have press agents and publicists and God forbid, maybe stylists or whatever the things that they have. Like, I know I have a team. What is a manager versus an agent? Some people just have one, some people just have the other, some people have both. Talk me through that a little bit.
I think a manager is defined differently by everyone. And I think that's the beauty of our profession is we each offer something different, and we each come to the business from a different area and a different corner. Like there was a generation before us that there've always been these managers. It was one of those things where you used to hear like, you don't need a manager until you have a career to manage.
I definitely heard that graduate. No, you don't. Just an agent, not a manager until you have
which I can't speak to. I've always had a manager. When I was an actor, I met my manager when I was 11, and she got in there and she gave me vision in terms of like what it was that I could do and be in the business. So for me, a manager I can't tell you what all managers do. There are some managers who act like agents. There are some agents who act like managers. An agent technically is based on contracts. They're supposed to go out and get you contracts and get you jobs and auditions and negotiate and all of that stuff. I believe a manager is kind of the glue that holds the entire team together and should be the number one. It's sort of like the chief of staff. If the actor is the president or the CEO of their company, of their business, I always view my job as like your chief of staff. And which is why it's really important that, you're aligned with your manager. Like your manager, we're not a friend, but we're a very, very trusted confidant and, an ally. And I think we look at things as objectively as we can possibly look at it, bearing in mind your heart and your mind, but also understanding that it's a business and you're signing up for putting yourself out there and making money. And, I think it's a lot of finding the right energy and making sure that somebody serves as the right mouthpiece for you. Because first and foremost, like you can't go anywhere without having the proper mouthpiece, the proper person who is shaping your talent and speaking about your talent and also advising you on doors to open or maybe not open.
And how many of your clients also have agents? So I guess you said some managers function as an agent, and sometimes they are functioning with an agent, but as the chief of staff, and then whatever the other positions in the cabinet. I'm not going to be able to help you with that. That the agent would be. What percentage for you are you servicing more as that overseer versus you are actually negotiating contracts as an agent might?
I think we're all collaborative. I mean, everybody brings something different, and like I said, every agent brings something different. So, who might be right for one client at a certain agency may be completely wrong for another at another, which is why actors are like, I just need to get an agent. I just need to get an agent. No, you really just need to get the right agent. Everybody brings a set of eyes and a heart and a brain. And a voice, and leverages their own influence over that artist in hopefully the most positive way that keeps them grounded and balanced. I think the manager ultimately is in charge of that and should oversee that and should keep the course. I can't say that all managers do that. I never grew up in the management training system. I wasn't an agent. I was a casting director, and I saw the opportunity because I was an actor, and also like most of my friends are actors and directors and in this business. I saw just an opportunity and a void to fill in the business in an area where I felt that I could be most useful. And then just going back to like what I set out to do in New York when I was 22, I realized at like, I don't know, somewhere at 35, 36. And then definitely after the pandemic, it's all about being useful to others. And putting, and especially if you're taking money, especially if you're taking 10%, it's about adding value. As much as you can. So that's kind of what I do as a manager. And, my career has expanded. I've produced certain things, but it's not my defining, it's not what I hold myself high. I used to want to be defined as a producer, because I felt like that was a badge of honor that was bestowed on people at the highest level of the business. And then I started becoming a producer and realizing, oh, wait, we're kind of all producers, and like it's a silly contest when it comes to like the credit that you get. And I think that's only something you discover like after you've cared so much about the credit,
So imagine you don't have a Judith Light to tell you, hey, you're a manager. Like, what would one think makes them well suited to be a manager? Maybe a manager or an agent, though that will define manager slightly differently here. What would you like? What do you think she saw in you, and or what would you see in a young person if you were to tell them, hey, I actually think you're a manager? Like, what does that mean you're good at? What does that mean? What qualities did you have that makes you good at this?
Judith made me aware of a concept of light worker. I don't know if you've ever heard that term.
Named after her?
No.
Oh,
Coincidentally.
yes. I mean, she just knew the Murphy principle.
No, I mean, and you Google light worker, and or maybe Judith herself didn't, but she introduced me to like a lot of concepts. I think she defines herself as she's Jewish, as am I, but like I'm not necessarily like this is what religion is. Like I'm very open-minded about what's going on in the universe and always questioning. And Judith turned me on to this conversation about like there are people that are light workers, and their job is to uplift people and help guide them closer to their own inspiration and what the light worker sees and feels is going to bring light to not only this person, but also many other people, like large groups of people. So light workers work individually one-on-one. Anybody can be a light worker, but I started to explore during Ugly Betty, like maybe there's something out there, like maybe there's something more spiritual to working in the business. Maybe it's not about, I got really wrapped up, to be completely honest, I got really wrapped up in Emmy Awards and during Ugly Betty, because the show was celebrated with so many Emmy Awards. And I think at that time, I was really just chasing like achievement and wanting to be someone. It's like the old identity catching up with me. And none of the things that I maybe was expecting, the show was always nominated for Emmy Awards, including casting for year 1 and 2. Year 3, I wasn't nominated. The show wasn't nominated. That was a disappointment. And also a wake-up call to like, maybe it's not about like me. Maybe it's about like we. I know that sounds hokey, but like, so I thought that was a really good wake-up call for me. And I collected a bunch of, I started going back to your question. I'm sorry. I started listening to actors around me. I started noticing there were people who didn't have managers who I thought were really talented, or people who didn't feel seen in their work by their representation. And so I had a much more inflated sense of ego then than I do now. But I was like, I'm going to be a manager. I'm going to be a producer. I'm going to be a manager. I'm going to go off and start my own thing. And anybody who wants to come with me, let's do it. And Randy Harrison was a friend of mine from college. He was on Queer as Folk, and he's a really gifted actor. An actor who came on early on, and Elizabeth Stanley. I don't know if you know who that is. She's a Tony-nominated actress.
I've heard of her, and Grammy winner.
Grammy winner.
Yeah, of course.
She was, this like early glimmer in my eye of somebody that I was like, it's kind of like a creative marriage. You look at your clients like, I don't want to marry you in that sense, but like creatively, I do. Like I want to continue to explore opportunities for these beautiful, talented people, and be a part of that,
and I guess
like help them.
It need not be true, but it does seem like it is often true that a manager relationship is a longer one. That it seems like, and we'll get into this in the second half, so you can tell me if it's not true, but that you're looking for potentially someone you manage for years, that it's not about as much as, not that you would always switch agents every couple of years, but it's a little more common to go, you know what, I'm not sure this is working. I might freelance here and then move on to the next person and then find the agent that's the right fit for you. But it seems like a manager might be with you through that transition, even that you might say this is a longer term, relationship. Well, it seems like you've had a lot of long-term relationships.
Yeah, sometimes like obviously, that's, you go into every relationship that every client that you sign, you may have a meeting with them, or you may have like a call. There are a couple clients that I've started working with over the pandemic that I only, started working with, meeting in person. There's one client that I started working with right before graduation from college. Her name is Claire Kwan. I saw her college showcase at Northwestern. I immediately started working with her, and now, like a couple months later, she's going to be in the original cast of Almost Famous on Broadway.
Let's go.
Let's go, Claire. Let's go. Except I haven't even met her. I've only seen her work, and like I've gotten to know her certainly over like FaceTime and Zoom and all of that stuff. But I think the long-term strategy is always in my mind. But like I've had some of my greatest runs with clients have been a short-term period of time, and it's always been with certain objectives. Like, one of my dearest friends, Gavin Creel, we started working together with the specific objective of, capitalizing following Ugly Betty, that Tony win. Sorry, not Ugly Betty. Yeah. Hello, Dolly. Similar. Hello, Dolly. Capitalizing off that Tony win, and sort of starting to producing his concerts and getting him out there and starting to beef up the television exposure. And in that period of time, we're able to, that was a 2-year window, and then the pandemic happened, and then the world changed and the industry shifted and my business shifted. And I don't know, like you really want to have a long, like I've been with clients a really long period of time. And then I've been with clients who've, you realize after a few years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 6 months sometimes, like, oh, you know what? We have different visions on your way forward, or we've achieved all that we need to achieve, and I don't know what the next way forward is, or they may feel like I'm not the right person to take them there. So there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of relationships that are long-term and that are lifers. But, it's also
Yep.
about the work, and it's about the day-to-day, and it's about just the building blocks of this industry, which can at times feel super subjective,
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is a great place to take a quick break. We're going to run a couple ads, and on the back end of this break, but we'll do a little bit of advice from the other side of the table, from the representation side for actors. So we're back in a flash. Okay, we are back with Geoff Soffer. And we're going to get into, this is one of the most exciting segments we've done on the show today. So I'm really excited about this. Not today, I mean that we've done it all. We're doing it today, but it's one of the
ever.
most exciting of all the segments. Since so many of our listeners are in high school or college or right out of college, I think a lot of them are going to be really fascinated with the question of representation, especially how to get representation, right? But then also some of the stuff we've been talking about, what kind of reps should you have? How do you build a relationship with them, et cetera? So I thought it would be really helpful for us to maybe spend a little time in your shoes and just like see what the world looks like from a Geoff Soffer point of view, right? So I'm going to give you a bunch of different questions, and I really certainly you can give advice from the actor's perspective, but I really would love to hear from you, just like, what does it feel like? What are you looking for? What do you think when you see X and Y, right? So I think actors spend a lot of time thinking, I want to impress you, but I'd love to see from the other side of the table. What are you thinking about? Okay, so are you ready for this Geoff Soffer gauntlet we're about to run?
I am.
Let's
Sort
go.
of, I guess.
If you're meeting a young actor, and let's say especially like Claire, right? Especially a young actor, maybe you're seeing them in showcase. Maybe it's when you go to a college and you're meeting a whole class of 20 some actors, 12 actors, whatever it is in the class. And you're brought in, you're meeting a bunch of people. What are you looking for as you're seeing their work that makes you consider, I might want to rep this person, right? Imagine you're not going to rep most of them. Most of them is going to be a no. What are you looking for when you go, this does feel like a diamond in the rough that makes me go, Claire, I want you?
I think fearlessness in the work, preparation without question.
And what does that mean? How do you see preparation? What are you looking?
I think, just preparation means showing up and just putting your mind and your soul and your heart and your being and your every moment of your being into this moment, into
Mm-hmm.
this song, monologue, scene,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I think it's, a lot of people talk about the it factor
Mm-hmm.
and what is the it factor. And I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it for me is energy. And like, it's cliche, but it's really hard to explain what is that immediate attraction to somebody's
Mm-hmm.
talent. There have been literally Oscar winners that I have been, that have come in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm appreciative of anybody who wants to be represented by me,
Mm-hmm.
and anybody who wants to take a meeting or, whatever. But, like, we didn't have the connection. We didn't have
Uh-huh.
the vibration. I didn't see it. Maybe
Uh-huh.
they wanted it, and I didn't see it. And they, so I pass, they go on to sign with another manager or
Mm-hmm.
another agent or another person who does see it, who
Mm-hmm.
does feel it. And then that person is holding the key. So I think it really is about finding the right person, the right
Mm-hmm.
connected individual that is your doorway to the industry, right?
And okay, we're going to talk a little bit about type and brand later. I promise it's one the gauntlet. But just in this consideration, how much are you thinking about your current client list and going, I actually have someone who's just like you? Like, if you really like someone, would you go, I'll have two people who are very similar? Or are you thinking more, I do kind of want, I don't have you yet, and I'm interested in having you in my client base? Or is it more just about, you're special, we're vibing, I don't care if I have five of you?
I think the olds, I had a wonderful company, Soffer Nameoff, for 10 years with Jen Nameoff, and we built this incredible management company that I should say incredible. I felt that it was incredible in that we signed stars. We were really focused on signing stars, and
Mm-hmm.
I think occasionally we would sign duplicates and overlaps, and people who would be up head to head with certain clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that came from my first of all, a period of time when we emerged as a management company, there were very few management companies that were starting out, certainly our generation. So like we wanted to provide like a really good shelter for our clients. So I think we, you look at the clients that we had over that decade, and like we had a number of like, clients who've like gone on to like maybe replace each other or go in for similar roles and things like that. I think now what I'm looking for is really just the meaningful connection to the individual performer. And chances are duplicates are, I'm probably going to avoid duplicates. Duplicates sounds so cold and like,
for sure,
but I think everybody knows in terms of like submissions,
people you'd be submitting for the same part would.
I try to keep it very small. I try to keep it very focused. Like I'm not valuable unless I'm completely tapped in and tuned in to every client and everything that they're doing. And so I feel like if you have somebody that's sort of in the same, you have a few people in that lane, I feel like I'm creeping into a territory of like an agent and somebody that's really just trying to get people jobs, which I was trying to do for like a lot of my career. I think now I'm very much, looking towards putting projects together and connecting dots and really trying to get in the weeds rather than just getting people started.
Yep. Can we talk specifically about that interview? So many of our clients, so many of our guests, when we talk about like, you went to school and like, what do you wish had been a bigger part of your school? They'll talk about this kind of business of the business classes and they wish they knew more about the business. I think one area that's often lacking, we spend so much time preparing for that showcase week, and then we get 10 calls in from agents and whatever. And then, oh my God, I got to walk in and do what for them and what that. So maybe let's imagine you've called in 5 people from a CCM showcase or whatever that you're interested in. Maybe it's 3 people, whatever, but you've called some number of people in. What are you looking for in that interview? Now, what are you trying to sniff out as you go? Do we keep vibing? And do we have the same goals for your career? How is that going with you? And what are you looking for from an actor in that moment to go, I want to sign this person?
In the meeting, post
in that meeting,
performance.
They sang their face off. God, they were alive. They brought their full energy. They were prepared. So they did all this stuff performance-wise. You liked them. Now, as they're sitting in that meeting, what are you looking for that makes you go, this sealed the deal. I want to work with you?
I think the humanity of that person, of that young person, or, if it's somebody who's in their 30s, 40s, like whatever, 50s, whatever. I have clients of all ages, I think. But, specifically for your audience, I think it's like, are they relatable? Do I want to have dinner with them and talk about their lives and their fears? And do I want to help them? Do I feel empathy for what it is that they're trying to achieve? Do I understand their talent, but do I understand their struggle? Because I feel like every artist, it goes hand in hand. Like you have to have a struggle. It's one of the reasons why I was like, I can't be a professional artist. Like I don't do well with struggle. I like knowing what I'm doing during the day. I like stability. I like having an agenda. I like itineraries and stuff like that. But I have to feel like, what is your struggle? What are you looking to express to the world? What are you looking, what kinds of audiences are you looking to reach? I've represented a vast variety of different kinds of performers, from, people who do mostly branding and influencing to, award-winning actors. And I think right now it's sort of figuring out, who are those actors and who are those artists that truly inspire me, that speak to me? And if their voice off stage is speaking to me equally, then I go after the business. And all of my clients, I think at this moment, speak to me personally, and they also speak to me professionally. I've always, and part of that is like growing up in this business. Like, I think a lot of us chase after the profession. We chase after achievement. We chase after what we think our family and friends are going to go, ooh, well, you're whatever. I think we have to do that. I did, I chased what I wanted to chase. And like, there were certain trinkets in the industry that I thought were very attractive. in my 20s, and there are certain badges and trinkets that I don't find as attractive now. I think right now it's when actors are going into to meet professionals and they're looking for representation. I think it's about communicating who you really are, especially with a manager. I can't say an agent. You know, an agent doesn't sometimes want to get to know you as well as a manager will get to know you.
Yep.
There is that distance sometimes between, an actor and an agent. An agent might be looking after sometimes hundreds of actors and sometimes dozens of your types. But with a manager, I think it's like it's truthfully communicating your talent. And then when you're off stage, it's truthfully communicating who you are, and then letting whatever you call it, God, universe, whatever powers that be, like if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And same thing when it dissipates, you know, sometimes like you go different. I have many friends and many, you know, and clients, like clients who are dear friends whom I've worked with, you know, and you realize like, oh, you know what, we're not clicking anymore. Like you need somebody who's going to kick you in another direction. And I'm not. We've become too friendly. We've become too casual. And so,
I love that idea of share your struggle, though. I mean, I think that is, especially for young actors to hear that, because at least without having maybe quite enough knowledge and preparation, though of course CMU did some preparation for the interviews, my instinct was to show my very best, perfect self in all of those interviews. I really think I was bringing a lot of like my polish and my preparation, and and I'm so intelligent, you're really gonna think I'm smart in a way that you go, I wonder actually if the fit could have been better if I was like, what if I bring my actual vulnerable self in the room, and that person might be more interesting than, you know, sort of the Aaron Sorkin version of myself where I go, I have all the right things to say and I'm really smart and I can talk quickly and I can be like, okay, Charlie, geez, calm down, you know.
It's a constant exploration for me, because especially as grown up as a child performer, you know, you sort of always are available to have conversations with people, and you're always, you know, you want, this is easy. This is somewhat easy. But I think getting deeper, especially with management, you know, like you go deep, you have deep conversations. Like we talk about, like, you know, with some of my clients, we talk about their fears. We talk about child, you know, having a child. We talk about the death. They've experienced death. You know, I had my first, what I call a tragedy happened in my family during the pandemic, as you know, hundreds of, you know, millions of people have as well. You know, my clients had to deal with that. You know, there were clients stood by me for a year as I sort of fell apart and picked up the pieces and figured out who I was. So I think, you know, when you're looking for your representation, specifically as a manager, and a lot of your listeners are younger, like, you know, they have parents who are probably going to be their managers, at least into the...
Call them momagers, but yes.
Momagers. Like my mom, like of blessed memory, is the kind of manager that I strive to be. Like she was very involved, but she was also like hands off. She was like not going to tell me how to feel about something because, like, you know, and I think actors really should try to find that kind of person for themselves. And that's the person that's going to help them, you know, get to the place they're looking to go. But going back to what I was saying, you know, it's about authenticity now. And as opposed to when we were younger, when you had to show spark, you had to show that plastic panache and like panache.
Yeah, sure.
Polish.
Panache.
Something like that. Panache.
For sure.
Something like that.
In both capacities, so I'd love to talk both in the capacity of as a casting director and as a manager. How do you like to be kept in touch with? This is one of those questions that actors right out of school really struggle with. So let's say kept in touch with, let's say we had that meeting and you go, hey, I'd love to keep in touch, but it's not going to be a yes for now, whatever, which might just mean no, but you're saying I want to be kept in touch with, but also just like, or both kept in touch with and got in touch with, I guess. How would you like, do you like a postcard? Do you like an invite to a show? Should people be DMing you on social media? You know, like how would you want to go, both a respectful way of being, you know, contacted, but also like if let's say I'm interested in working with you, I've listened to this podcast, I go, Geoff, Soffer sounds perfect. This is exactly who I want to work with. You haven't seen my showcase yet. You haven't seen, how should I be contacting you? How should I be, you know, sort of interacting with you professionally in the world that might make us establish a relationship?
I it's a hard question. I'm like,
We
I
don't give
have
you
a
easy questions here,
complicated
John. We're here
relationship
for
with
it.
social media. I'm starting to get on it a little bit more because I feel that, I don't know, I have more to say. And so like, I am private on social media, but I am
Mhm.
starting to like, get curious. And so if actors are public and their work is on their social media and like they have, interesting clips or like they have good auditions or they have like
Mhm.
performances that they want to share, I think that's probably the best way of grabbing somebody like me,
Mhm.
our attention. Um, like the days of like send a postcard or like a headshot. I don't know, I don't really respond to mail.
Mhm.
So, it takes me
I
a
don't even
while.
get the mail.
I don't
Elizabeth
get
gets mad at me.
mail.
I never even
No,
get it. I'm like, that's fine.
nobody does that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody does that. But I would encourage people like you can only have that first impression once. You can
Mhm.
only make that first impression once, and that's not to say that like you're going to be ready. Like you may put your material out when you're 21, and like you don't
Mhm.
have your Broadway debut until you're like 31 or
Mhm.
35. I talk about Faith Prince a lot. Faith was like, she was in New York kicking around like for years before like she won a Tony Award for Guys and Dolls. I'm using
Mhm.
somebody of our generation and somebody that like I looked up to starting out and somebody that I've followed. But like you look at like Shoshana Bean and you look at all of the actresses of today, Elizabeth Stanley, of course, without exception. Like the days are changing in terms of like
Mhm.
getting your talent out there, and I think we all have to be a little bit more aware of what social media is capable of and how to
Mhm.
use it to our advantage. And I think professionally, it's about putting out the polished version of whatever you're doing. But I would
Mhm.
say again, the first impression, like make sure it's good, make sure it's ready. Don't
Mhm.
put something out just because you're feeling like a good a good cry and it captured
Mhm.
like a great emotion and I'm going to put this online and like get people to like we're not looking for that. We're looking for real polished actors, singers, entertainers.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's also like writers and you know creators,
Mhm.
directors,
You can say it.
content
Podcast hosts.
creators,
Yes, of course.
podcast
Yes,
hosts.
exactly. But what are you looking for in that social? So let's say like maybe it's a social media with some and a click to a website or whatever it is, right? So you're going. I'm going to check this person out. I mean, are you looking? Are you excited about the resume? Are you excited about a school degree? Are you excited about a great headshot? Like what is it that makes you go, huh? I might, and maybe this we can bring in the idea of type or branding a little bit if we want to think about branding as a larger thing of like if you're thinking I think this person could be commercially successful with a little bit of help, what are you looking for that makes you think it's just God, they're so attractive, or God, they're a beautiful voice, or what is it that makes you go I bring this person in for a meeting? At least what grabs your eye when you're seeing a social media post or website?
I think it's their energy. I think it's really like it's not necessarily their headshot or their uh, uh, you know, I think it's their energy. I think it's the performance. I think it's their voice. I think it's their eyes. Um, I think it's their openness to the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also think it's the ability to like lose themselves a little bit in their work and forget that I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think a lot of young performers are always aware that there's an audience. And I think what
Mm-hmm.
interests me, especially in my work and the performers that I work with, like when you see them outside of their element, they're just very, they're beautiful people. Let's put them on a pedestal. They are
Of course,
beautiful
okay.
people.
Yes,
But like
yes.
when you see them, they're just actually very human,
Mm-hmm.
very relatable and very real. And I feel like that if that can be captured in the context of our art form, like through a song or through, a monologue, and I can capture that, like then I'm all in. Like I want to see more. And I will go down a rabbit hole of YouTube clips, of websites. I will potentially look for them on social media. I will look to see, I will kind of stalk them, like in a good way, because I want to get to know like what makes them tick. Because like I have to know as much as I can about these performers because I have to represent them. And I also have to know what how do you say this? I have to be aware of what they are not aware they're capable of. And like that's not to say that I'm always going to get it right. And sometimes like I may have an idea that I'll pitch to a client and they may be like, no, definitely not. And that's fine, whatever. I don't, best idea wins.
When you're looking for actors, are you, again, in that question of kind of branding or how you think where they're going to break into the business? Let's imagine someone who's not already a Tony winner and all those things, but you're going to work with them and go, I think I can really take you to the next step. Are you looking at actors who are already pretty well defined, meaning like, oh, that girl does comedic improv. Let me tell you, she's so good. Give her that moment. Or are you looking for chameleon actors where you go, I have no idea. There's so many things we can do with you. Like what are you more interested in terms of taking on a client?
Both. I love both. I love the seasoned, polished, I have a few clients, who are incredibly accomplished theater artists in New York. They're incredibly respected by casting directors. You've seen them in films, you've seen them in television, but they're just sort of like, they're actors, they're creatures, they're chameleons. I think like I'm drawn to those performers. I'm also drawn to the performers who don't know they're performers yet, like people who are sort of discovering their craft, but they're really finding incredible discoveries. And, I might be connected to somebody by their coach or their, their
coach meaning like sports
teacher.
Coach?
What's that?
Sports coach or you mean acting coach?
Acting
like
coach.
Aaron Rodgers is one of your clients, is what you're telling me. No. I didn't know. I was ready to hear it.
No, their acting coach, their acting teacher, their voice teacher. If people are starting to have success in development, if they're in school, if they're in a training program, it's talent comes in all levels. It comes at all times. Somebody that you sign at 18 maybe have tremendous success until they're 24. And then they go through a period of like, oh, what are they going to play? What are they going to do? Whereas somebody who is not working at 18 until they're 28 or 38, they're developing life skills. They're developing humanity. They're talk about artist struggle. They're waiting tables. They're handing out flyers at TKTS. They're struggling for their art. They are craving any kind of performance opportunity they can get, large or small, off Broadway, bit part on Maisel, like whatever it is. Those are the people that are also attracted to me. I hate talking about clients, but I use them, as examples. Like I just started working with an incredible Broadway veteran named Lana Gordon. And she was in the original cast of Lion King. She was Heather Headley standby. And, she had a moment on Broadway. She was in the ensemble of that. She was in the ensemble of Jesus Christ Superstar. And she realized, at a certain point, like, I want to go and perform. I want to do it for me. I don't want to just be in New York understudying, or I don't want to be in New York just waiting for that big opportunity. I want to get in there. I want to be an artist. So she moved to Europe. She became a star. She eventually got, connected into the Chicago, the musical circuit. It brought her back to Broadway. And, she's done 2 Broadway shows in 1 year. And, I'm interested in the creatures of our business, the people who, like me, started out in the beginning. They've had a few chapters and, or they're about to have a few chapters. I have a lot of clients who are in, big feature films who are, doing a Broadway musical one day, but the next day they're deciding like, oh, you know what, that's a lot of work, 8 shows a week. I have to take some time off. So, and then we're chasing a film career and expanding the presence in the film world. So I think it's just everybody being truthful to what their inspiration is. What is your reason for being in the business? Is it because you are constantly seeking validation and you're waiting for the applause? That's not going to last you a long time. But if it's really because that you're chasing your inspiration as an artist and you're going to do it, whether you get the applause or whether you're in the basement of, whatever, some grocery store, which I've done.
What musical did you do in the basement of a grocery store?
So it used to be called the Maverick Theater. It's on 23rd and 8th. It's now...
Oh, this is UCB you're talking about.
It was UCB.
Yes, under the Gristedes.
Yes.
I performed at that very theater. That's true. Under the Gristedes. I don't think of that as being under a theater, but I guess it is, or under a grocery store.
I made my debut.
Can we talk a little bit about the producing aspect of it all? So it seems like actually a lot of management companies or managers also end up kind of in a producing capacity. Or I guess I'm interested in why those two professions seem like natural allies, and maybe you can just define a little bit of what a producer is for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think a producer comes, again, in all shapes and sizes. There are producers, there are executive producers, there are co-producers, and, everybody brings a different ingredient to the puzzle. I've been a co-producer on Broadway. I've been an executive producer in films, which means a lot of fundraising and a lot of investors and wrangling, all of that stuff, the money. I've also put together projects on my own and grassroots. He's way more famous than you. I did with one of my dear friends, two of my dear friends, Michael Urie and Ryan Spahn and Hallie Pfeiffer. And we fundraised, we put it together, we location scouted, we cast it, we wardrobe, soup to nuts. I supervised all of that film. And, I think a producer is just, again, somebody that is bringing energy to a project in whatever area they possibly can. Sometimes it's connecting with pitches. Sometimes it's connecting to an agent. I have a client who, his name is Andy Mientes. He's a Broadway, an established Broadway performer. I think he'd be a great person for you to talk to because
I went to high school with Andy.
No way.
Small world.
My God.
Yes, we love Andy.
Andy, was a very successful Broadway performer for several years. He started doing television, and one day he was like, "How can I expand my art? How can I continue to chase my inspiration?" And he was inspired to write a book. So he, we had this very Hollywood conversation in London where he was like, "I'm going to write a book." And I'm like, "Okay, write the book," then not expecting that a year later he'd be like, here's the book, and, and the book was just option for film and television rights. The book is now published. It's called Fraternity. It's now available in booksellers nationwide. It's an incredible achievement. It's a beautiful book, a young adult, young adult fiction novel. And it's now being optioned as a television series. And so that's sort of producing, it's sort of taking a client and seeing what kind of content they're creating, how they're constantly expanding in the business, and then figuring out how to monetize that, how to continue to bring them opportunities. I think the one thing I would say to young actors, which I don't think this generation has a lot of problems with, but the new generation, but you have to, like you said, multi-hyphenate. You have to always have something, because what happens is you wind up, I have clients who are on, we achieve the objective. We set out to achieve the objective, star on Broadway, star in a television show. Then the question becomes, okay, what now? What do you want to do? And, you can continue to audition. You can continue to wait for the studio film or the Marvel film or, the Broadway show, which a lot of brilliant actors will always do. Yep. Or you can start, creating a thing and creating your own part of the industry. And, that's what Tyler Perry did. A client just worked with him, and Jazzman's Blues is an incredible achievement. And it's a testament to his belief that you don't need Hollywood in order to do your art. and to get people to see it.
Krista Rodriguez was just on the pod, and she was talking about
I love her.
expanding your dream. That your dream continues to expand. You have the dream, but it has to expand. Otherwise, you run out. If you hit there, you have to
And
say,
you're just
and
waiting.
then what's next? And what's next? Yeah.
You're just waiting for others.
Jeff, I love how even while you're explaining what a producer is to us, you're explaining it, you're being a producer, and still you're managing to, push some paper here to sell some of Vandy's books. So now we got to put it in the show notes so that we'll have some links, so we'll sell some fraternity.
Yes, can I? Okay, great.
Yeah, of course.
Follow
okay,
all
let's
my
get
clients.
Yeah, exactly. Put them all in the show notes, all of their YouTube links.
All their links, all their work.
Let's get to our special game. Jeff has been sweating for an hour, waiting for this game. It's not going to be so bad, I promise.
Okay.
As you know, as a frequent listener to the pod, we play a unique game with all of our artist guests. Sometimes they're difficult trivia games, like Krista I made answer questions about the television show Survivor, which she did very well at. It was very difficult. We're both fans.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes this is silly nonsense. You're going to get some silly nonsense, okay?
Okay.
This game is called How Do I Manage? And we're going to imagine that you're representing the following celebrity clients, right? So you have about 10 to 15 seconds to give them advice on what their next big career move should be.
Yay.
All right.
Okay.
You imagine the goal in basically all cases is going to be an expansion of their artistry as well as maybe increasing their celebrity and financial prospects. So it's like, what's the next thing that we need to be doing if this is your client?
I do this in my spare time.
Okay, great. We'll see how we do this.
Yeah.
Client number one, they walk in your door. It's Miles Teller. He's just done Top Gun. He just hosted SNL. What does he need to do next in his career to achieve the next level?
I mean, I would have to get to know him, honestly.
Oh, Jeff, that's a boring answer for all of these. Not
I know. It's
no
why
time.
I'm like,
10 seconds. You're my pitch.
no
You're
time.
me.
I'd be like, have you done a play? Have you done a play lately?
Yes.
Have you done a play?
Off-Broadway play?
Yeah, anywhere. London. I mean, I would want to hear his interest in going to do a play by like a playwright that we all know and love, or like a friend that he wants to. I think a lot of times when you get to that place that he's getting to in his career, it's about lifting other people and lifting voices. So I encourage a lot of my clients when they get opportunities to like bring in other actors or do a concert with other people or collaborate. So I would say like, who are the people that you want to be working with? And let's try to work that into the plan. Okay,
you're taking this game much too seriously.
I know, I'm sorry.
And not nearly silly enough. Client number two. So Miles out. Miles working with you. Trevor Noah. He's stepping away from The Daily Show. He's done with The Daily Show. He wants something else in his life. Maybe it's about comedy. Maybe it's a movie. Maybe where does he go next? Where do you advise Trevor Noah to go next?
Just I guess I don't know. What does he want to do a play?
This sounds okay. All of these clients are going to end with you want to do a play in Gristedes? I got a great new off-Broadway play.
What I've realized in my life is the people that I'm really inspired by, truthfully, Charlie, like I'm not bullshitting you. If we did this interview 10 years ago, I would give you a complete, like this elaborate bullshit answer. I really am inspired by theater people. Like I'm inspired by people who grew up in the theater, who understand how to, so whether you're doing a play or whether you're starring on Broadway or whether, like whatever it might be, I would always ask the question, how are you feeding your art? How are you getting back to the core of what it is that you're trying to do? And if it's about like cleaning up an image, or, if it's talking about like getting another 1 million followers so that you get an extra $100,000 on a deal, like all of that stuff, I've been a part of those conversations and they've been very exciting. And I think every actor should have a representative that to some extent chases that stuff. But I think for me, if the takeaway is for parents and teenagers, I think it's about the art, the craft, studying the art, getting very aligned with who you are as an artist, studying as much as you can, getting prepared. School is great, but it's also about training. So sometimes school is not training and sometimes training is not school. Sorry, too deep.
No, I'll jump to the fun ones. Okay, so Dr. Oz walks into your office. Okay. Dr. Oz about to lose a historic election, just in terrible fashion. Now he wants to get back into TV. What are you going to do to help Dr. Oz get back into TV? What's his next step? How does he repair his image?
I think he should partner with Trump at Truth Social.
Okay, great.
And start a television show, because I think it's called Adore Me, and it's about and they cultivate only people who will adore them and give them exactly what
Yes.
they're looking for.
Yes, Dr. Oz. That's a great idea. That's $1 million idea. We have to cut that from the pod. We don't want to release that. That's a great
I
idea.
would sell the idea and then cut ties.
And then you're out.
I'd be
You're like,
like,
and you owe me half of that.
you'd
But
be
we're
like,
out.
and out.
Okay. What about Harry Styles walks into your office and he's dealing with some drama? There's the Olivia Wilde scandal. We don't know. He's breaking gender barriers. We're not sure. What does Harry Styles need to do next in his career?
I would have to talk to him.
Oh my God, Geoff. Geoff, the game. There's no talking.
Keep it light. I would sign him and I would keep the money and I would hire a 23-year-old to run point on his team and keep up with him.
That's the right answer. I was going to make you advise my baby also, but whatever, it's fine. She's been on Broadway already at 4 weeks old, so that was going to be but you've ended it at a great point. We don't need to do more silliness. Let's just do like one or two more questions in wrap up.
Sure.
I just want to talk a little bit about just the industry. You kind of mentioned this, how much the industry's changed in the past couple of years. Not that you have to be fully Nostradamus, but what have you seen it really change, and where do you think it's going from here in terms of, you have some clients that you've never met in real person that you're working with. And, how do you see 5 years from now the industry continuing to morph and change?
I think a lot of it is being done online. I think a lot of information is now being transferred and transmitted and received, and a lot of ideas are now being able to, be shared online on Zoom. So I think opportunities for talent to be seen and heard, I think has never been more possible, because I think writers are starting to be given an opportunity to write a little bit more truthful, to reflect the stories that are out there. So I think we're able to really find unique, colorful, interesting voices. But I also think with that, it gets competitive. I think there are a lot of people that call themselves actors, influencers. They have multi-hyphenates. It's hard for agents and representatives and casting directors to sometimes muddle through it, find the talent. There's a lot of rough. There are diamonds, but there's a lot of rough to get through. So I think, I like to believe that our industry and the people that operate at a higher echelon of, I consider myself a development. I love developing talent. It's what I have award winners, but I also have like people who are just starting out and booking their Broadway debut. It's like I'm wired to love that. And I think for me, it's just people, in such fierce competition. I think it's just what you can do to better your craft and better your instrument, whether it's, voice lessons, acting lessons, dance class, whatever it is, it's that ingredient. But it's also, there's a spiritual element, which we haven't even dived into. And there's a part of like, the ability to get and it's funny because I was like, I'm going to talk about spirituality the entire time. And I'm just going to talk about how it's really important, how really I've only recently found my inner stillness, my inner peace, and my ability to get quiet and get really focused on what it is that truly inspires me. So I think that's a missing element that I think the next generation is going to have that we didn't have. And, if people are still questioning what is mindfulness, what is inner peace, what is meditation, like what is all of that? And you're an artist, like you have to start with that. Like don't even go to school don't even go to an audition without knowing what mindfulness is, because I feel like it's one of the reasons why I never continued my performance career, because I wasn't able to get mindful until,
And this is why you're a great fit for Elizabeth, because I think she would say the same thing about herself and performing career. So
and it's why things unlock. I think it's why things unlock when they do. If you're 22 and you're very mindful and you're very focused and you're very like mindful, being like at peace with yourself and the ability to like calm yourself down, talk yourself through everything. If you're able to do that at an early age, I was not. You will be able to sustain a long career in this business, but you gotta be fierce. You gotta be hungry. I was very fierce. I was very hungry. I was very
Mm-hmm.
determined. I just didn't have a lot of inner peace. So I think a lot of people, I think this new generation, this new age, this, cyber world, I think we're more
Yep.
cognizant of that.
It's so true. I just want to talk a little bit to the parents out there. You mentioned this great relationship you have with your parents, and both great relationship, but also, and then some of that of like trying to prove to them, which I think is also like a really beautiful and not spoken about quite enough of how often at 26 we're still trying to impress our parents with why we got our BFA. But I just like to talk to those parents out there about like, what advice would you give to them as they're nurturing their young artists, whether they're still in high school or they're out of high school into college, out of college by now? What kind of advice would you give to the parents of young artists about, what they should be thinking about with their kids' careers?
Well, kudos for them to them for listening to this and like going this far into taking the care in listening and making sure that their kid has like a well balanced sense of self and also like a drive and determination to like forge a career in this business. I think it really has to start with the kid. And I think it has to start with the actor, when they're not a kid, the actor, no matter how old you are. It all has to come from you, and you have to really be inspired and you have to love it. And I think if your kid is inspired and loves it and is driving and fueling the conversation, then I think you just have to just support them, just love them and support them. They're going to make mistakes. It's inevitable, and you're not going to be able to help them. They're going to fail. You're not going to be able to help them. They're going to be told that they're horrible and they're going to get bad reviews, and get used to it. You're not going to be able to help them. I think my parents, who are incredible people, my mother, who passed, was an incredible guide and resource. My dad still is. I think the thing that they never, like, they did a good job in childhood, like raising me. Like they did everything that parents could do. They made mistakes. Who doesn't? I think the thing that they could have done better is get comfortable with the fact that like their kid's going to make mistakes and their kid is going to make some huge leaps in their career, leaps of faith in their career, and just trust that you've done as much as you can to give them the tools that even if it crashes and burns, like they're going to be able to figure it out. Like you're giving them enough support and love. My parents, like, they bailed me out a couple times, not in jail, but just of like desperation starting out. But then there was a period of time where they were like, no, you have to figure this out on your own. And I think the tough love, the balance of love and tough love, my parents were different, were contributing in different ways. I think that was beneficial. And, at the end of the day, like it's your kid's life. It's not yours. And if they want to chase this dream, of course you have fears. Of course, there's always going to be the idea that failure is around the corner. But I think it's easier to be in it with them and just support them and just, help guide the conversation rather than like, dictate the conversation. That is the best success I can give. It is it is their experience. It is not yours. And what I've seen is a lot of my clients have families who come from that kind of motto. Like, we don't know what, I'm not going to mention names. Like, we don't know what this industry is about, but we trust that we raised our kid to know right from wrong, to know, and, I think it's about that and letting go. But
I love it.
Yeah.
Geoff, if people wanted to follow you, they can do at Geoff_Soffer. Yes. Is there anything else that people should be checking out, or places you want them to go if they want to have more information or potentially even reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram and like questions. I'm always eager to, especially people who are listening to this podcast. There's so much negative about getting into show business, and like there's so much, I mean, maybe not so much now as there was like when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. But if anybody like responds to this message, or they want to get in touch, or they have questions or whatever, like, reach out to you, Charlie, or reach out to me on Instagram. Like, I'm happy to like do a back and forth if whatever, like this is not, you don't learn this. Like, you learn by doing in our industry, and you learn by meeting people. I learned by meeting really wonderful people and teachers and guides. And so I offer the same to people, and I wish everybody all the best. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Geoff. We so
pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Well, howdy. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Geoff. I think he is just the dearest creature. We've gotten to hang out a few times during like really high anxiety moments in Elizabeth's life, whether it's like a Broadway opening night or a press event or the Tony Awards, right? And he always feels like he is just caring for her, just like how he described the care of his mother, kind of patiently present. He's never insistent and just like unendingly supportive. I'm going to do a pretty short takeaway this week, which is really just to speak a little bit to the other side of the coin when it comes to representation. I think everything that Geoff said about what you're looking for in representation is absolutely true. I would co-sponsor every word of it. But I will also say, I think it is a thing to aspire to, and not always the reality for every young actor starting out. Ideally, you are shopping just as Geoff is suggesting, and you're able to meet with enough great people and have the luxury of choice that we're talking about, right? That dream is to have so many great options when it comes to agents and managers that you get to worry about, like, which do I vibe with the most? Who really gets me, right? But of course, some young actors graduating from school or moving to the city don't have that luxury, right? A lot of people go, I just want any agent, any manager, I want some representation so I can get in those rooms. And I think it can be difficult to navigate exactly where you should draw that line of pickiness. Just like a romantic relationship, if you're with the wrong person, you can end up feeling lonelier than being alone. So you would never want a toxic professional relationship or someone you didn't feel comfortable representing you professionally, right? That would not be good if you're like, I don't like them in a room negotiating for me. Well, then that's not the person to be with. But that said, often an actor doesn't have that luxury of choice, and you may have to dance with the one who brung you, or what do they say? That you got to love the one you're with sometimes, right? Often young actors have to do a bit of that compromise, and their representation may be taking them on and have lots of clients. They may not be given that kind of level of personal support. And, Geoff talked about really seeing the full and unique special things about you. I think specifically he said, I want to know the things that they don't even know that they can do, or whatever, right? What a dream to have your representation do that. But, sometimes it can be tough to see someone who even sort of sees you how you see yourself, right? Sometimes we're not going to get quite that luxury of what we might dream of in representation. I'll tell a personal story. I remember being submitted. This was like years into my career. I've done a lot of shows. I've done some really successful regional theater. I'd had a couple different representation. I had an agent and then a manager, and I'm in a new relationship. And this person, the second thing they submit me on is for Romeo and Juliet. And I'm like 26 at this point, and I'm 6'4" and 240, and I already look 35. And I just was like, this is a bit of a stretch, and I was like, well, I'm glad that he listened that I was into Shakespeare. So that's exciting. But for me, that then becomes a conversation to go, okay, how can we line up our mutual visions? Right show. I'm not sure we got the right role there. I mean, again, not that it's impossible that someone would cast Romeo that way. Of course, we don't believe in type and all those things, but I think it was very unrealistic at that point that someone was going to cast me to play a child in that show. Which, again, is not to say that even the choice that I made there, or that the choice that I'm suggesting some young actors may choose to make, which is to sort of compromise and try to work with who you can work with, that's not to say that's even the right decision. Just like in general, I wouldn't advise young students to do what Geoff's client did, where they were like, I need you to go do this for me. Or I forget exactly what he said it was, but it seemed like the attitude was like, wow, you're kind of bossing me around, right? I would generally suggest that I think a bit of deference and respect, and I think most importantly, kindness in all of your interactions can potentially be helpful, especially when you're early in your career. But there's nothing wrong with saying, I have standards, and if this person doesn't vibe with me, I don't want them representing me, right? That's not a wrong decision. The same way I think there's nothing wrong with what that client did in saying, technically you work for me, I pay you commission, you're my chief of staff, I'm the president, go do that thing, right? But I just want to say that I do think potentially there is the other side of the coin, which is not everybody chooses to go so boldly into that brave night. And most importantly for young actors who might not immediately be working with managers of Geoff's level and of Geoff's temperament, I just wouldn't want you to think that suddenly something was necessarily wrong if the fit wasn't so amazingly there at first, right? If it's not love at first sight and the person doesn't see the fullness of my artistry in the way that Geoff is describing, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is not a relationship that might be helpful for you early in your career. Just like how I have ruined Elizabeth for all other potential partners that she'll never be able to be with someone else romantically after how amazing I am, some people do end up having to compromise or settle a little bit if they don't achieve the 10 out of 10 that she did. Well, if you think this podcast and this segue is a 10 out of 10, go ahead and try to give us 10 stars. I'll bet it'll only let you do 5, but you can always do 2 different 5-star reviews. Just like log out of one account, log back in, another 5-star reviews. And we love those ratings and reviews. You can even say, hey, I love this podcast so much, I reviewed it twice. That's fine, right? And if you like these episodes and want to see more of them, or have any kind of specific direction, especially we're going in this new era, please reach out to us at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com with those thoughts or any of those questions, because we're doing that mailbag episode coming up over the winter holidays. You also, of course, can hit us up on the social medias if you prefer. Socials media. It's like attorneys general is what I should do. And, you can go to mtca.nyc for help with your individual prep for your college audition journey and to find more information about that junior workshop, which is also in the show notes of this very episode. To my young artists out there mapping their journey, I'm really sorry that I made that joke about Dr. Oz, and now the field has tightened. In fact, as you're listening to this, you may already know the result, and I really hope I didn't jinx this one, and if I did, I'm sorry. But either way, I'll see you next week.